The amount of fear we were in. We were just so scared. Everybody was injured. I can still remember the smell of the blood and what everybody looked like.
Numbers have meanings, and sometimes we look at these numbers and we forget the meanings behind them. You know, first 10-7 is a number everybody knows, October 7, 2023, and everything that was behind it. 251 people were brought into Gaza, kidnapped, put into tunnels, held hostage. Today, 562 days later, 59 remain in Gaza. The intelligence sources tell everybody openly that about 24 of them are alive. I still have hopes there may be more, but who knows. Aviva Siegel, who's with me today, was held hostage in Gaza for 51 days. Her husband was there with her, held hostage as well, but he stayed there for 484 days. These aren't just numbers, these aren't just names, these are people from my community, from the Jewish community, but these are also just people torn from their everyday lives and faced evil head on. They didn't ask to, but they did. I've been working with hostage families since October 7th in so many different ways, and I'm not here to tell you all the different things I did, but I can tell you that one of the experiences that I had was taking hostage families to Washington, D.C. to meet with members of Congress as early as October 2023. And one U.S. senator said to me, "Gabe, no matter what you do, keep telling the hostage stories, keep bringing them. In a few weeks, people are going to be sick of hearing from them. People want to move on with their lives, but don't let them move on. Let people see that these are humans, that they're still being held hostage, that even though they want to look away, don't let them look away." And that's what we're doing here today, 562 days later. I met Aviva Siegel and her husband Keith in this incredible dinner, which we'll speak about. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to have them at my home just a few weeks ago in Miami. I'm here in Israel for the Passover holiday with my family, and I reached out to Aviva, and she was so gracious to join me here in the studio to share her story with us. So first, Aviva, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
We were speaking a little bit about what it takes for you to be here. And you were saying, I hope it's okay if I share, you're saying that it's, you're still sort of shut down. You still sort of feel like you're in Gaza. Tell me, I felt almost guilty reaching out to you to ask to do this, even though I'm doing it just to try to share your story so people know what's happening and you know that. How does it feel to continue to come back and tell your stories of what happened in Gaza before we go into it?
First of all, my grandmother she was lucky because she came out of Europe before the war started, the war number 2 started. But most of her family, her sisters with their children, her parents, were all killed in the Gaza, in the World War number 2. And I was asked to go there for a march, and I said that it'll be too difficult for me, knowing that they died and what she carried all her life. And she didn't tell me stories. She kept quiet. And when I came out of Gaza, I said, I'm not going to be like my grandmother. I'm going to talk. I'm going to shout. I'm going to tell my story. And that's what I've been doing since I came back. I've been talking and sharing. And the story is very difficult because I went through difficult times there. And, I hear all the time that people say that after war number 2, never again. And it happened again in a different way. And there's still 57 families that they've got hostages in Gaza that are waiting and crying and begging and screaming and so upset that it's just terrible, and my heart is broken for them. So for the 24 that are still alive and all the rest that aren't, am trying to do everything I can to bring them back.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and I know the free world appreciates you sharing your voice. As a Ashkenazi Jew whose family came from originally from Israel, from Judea, went to Russia, and from Russia to Argentina in the pogroms. Also were able to miss out on the World War II, thank God, and my family on the other side went from Russia to Poland, and my great-grandmother went to Argentina in 1910, so also was spared. The rest of her family was not so lucky. We all grew up with grandparents and great-grandparents or aunts and uncles who wouldn't share the stories. But I also think that they all assumed that everybody knew what happened and that no one would question it. Now we live in this era where not only are people questioning the Holocaust, they're questioning what happened on October 7th, what happened to the kidnapped. When people come out of Gaza, you see the chatter saying, well, people don't look so bad. Some look so bad. Some don't look so, right? Everybody's questioning everything. We're sort of in an information overload era. So people have to look at someone in the eye sometimes and hear their stories. So can you just tell us, you're a little bit about your life before October 7th. You were living in the kibbutz for 40 years. Tell us a little bit about the life in southern Israel.
Well, Keith and I decided to live there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Green, lots and lots of birds that just sing through all the day. And that's what we loved about it. The kids like just running on the grass and playing with their friends and walking without cars, so they could go to their friends without us taking them. And we have 4 children that we brought up on Kibbutz Gaza. And we just had a lovely, lovely, beautiful community that we loved so much. And 64 of them were murdered on the 7th, if you can imagine that. Part of them my friends, part of them my children's friends. And it's just too much to even think about something like that could have happened. And you said just before that the people that came out of Europe before and kept quiet about what happened to their families, I think it was too difficult for them to even talk about it, because I do know that the hostages that don't talk because it's too difficult for them. I decided when I came back that I'm not going to keep quiet.
So tell us, October 7th, people are familiar with the story. Rockets start blaring through over Gaza into Israel, something that you're used to when you live in southern Israel, which was an unfortunate reality of life, at least pre-October 7th. And at some point you realized things were different, and you started hearing terrorists in your community. Can you take us from there? What happened there?
Yeah. When it started, the first rocket that was coming towards Gaza, we thought that everything's just like we know, because, I, for many, many years, I used to hide myself behind trees, and I used to see the missiles falling just around me. And so that day we ran into our little bomb shelter. We were woken up, and we didn't think that anything terrible is happening, that it's like a normal day, because that's what we had for many, many, many years from Gaza. And very shortly we understood that it sounded like the end of the world. The whistles of the rockets that came from Gaza didn't stop for a second. And Keith and I just sat in our little bomb shelter, holding hands and just trying to figure out what's happening, because it felt like the end of the world. We did ask our kids and our family, my sister, what's happening here? Because we don't know. We were disconnected from the internet, so we couldn't know what's happening. And nobody answered until my daughter wrote, "You're the strongest people in earth." And whenever I say that couple of words, it just makes me cry, because I remember that feeling when I read that. She meant by saying, "You're strong. Take care of yourself. Something really bad is happening now."
Where was your daughter living?
My daughter was in Haifa.
Okay, in the north of Israel.
Yeah. One of my kids was on Kibbutz Gaza, but the 3 girls that we have weren't, luckily. And my daughter, every once in a while, one of my daughters tell me every once in a while, "You remember that you invited us to come for that Shabbat?" Because it was a chag, it was a holiday. And how lucky she felt by not coming, and how lucky I feel by that she said that, "Sorry, Mom, but we can't come." So I had one child that was living not too far away from my house, and he very shortly said that he's holding his fingers and that he can hear the Arabic from outside. But luckily, he was saved. I didn't know that he was saved, and Keith didn't. We were taken to Gaza, not knowing if he's alive, and I was sure that they killed him, because he said that he can hear the Arabic, and we got disconnected. He's got this dog that he loves, and I was sure that he screamed at them by killing the dog, and that they just shot him. So I was there.
I'm sorry, so they shot the dog or your son?
No, they didn't even go into his house.
Oh, wow.
So he was so lucky that they didn't. What they did do is that they brought all their guns and they put them underneath his house. So they used to come and take the guns and leave. So they came and went, but they didn't go into his house. And at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he heard Hebrew from outside. And he understood that maybe he should shout and say that he's alive. And he did. And those were soldiers that saved his life. And he was lucky.
So at some point, the Hamas fighters, the terrorists that were in your community, in your kibbutz, they breached and came into your house.
Yeah. So we were sitting there, Keith and I, and after a couple of hours, we started hearing the Arabic from outside and them screaming and the shooting. They shot the house from outside, the windows. And then I remember looking at Keith and saying, they're here. And we could hear the steps inside the house. And the door just opened, every door opened. And just a while ago, I was there on the kibbutz. I went to see the house and I saw the bullets that they tried to kill me inside where I was just standing. There's holes in the floor. And so I'm lucky. And Kit is lucky. We're both very, very, very lucky to be sitting here. I'm lucky that I'm alive, and Kit's lucky that he's alive, coming back, because many people on our community were just killed. And they opened the door, and even though it was written lock from the inside, we locked the door. But they opened it, and 15 of them shoved themselves in, screamed at us. And what saved our lives is Keith put his head on his knees and his hands on his head, while I was just standing and screaming. And when they picked him up, they tore his shirt, and they took us out of the back window of the house, and they tore something in my knee, so I'm injured for the rest of my life. Sometimes I can't even walk. It's so sore. And they pushed us. Keith fell, and they broke his ribs. And they shot us, and one of the bullets hit Keith's hand. While they're screaming and shouting, they took us to Gaza. And it seemed like families, and everybody was just outside welcoming us and clapping their hands and shouting in Arabic, Allahu Akbar.
It's just the general public in Gaza?
It seemed like everybody knew what's happening. They were just standing and waiting for us to come. While we were shaking, I was sure that they were going to kill us at that moment. But when we arrived to Gaza, they took us underneath the ground. And it was Keith and I at the beginning, and then other people came from Kibbutz Gaza. Everybody was full of blood. Everybody had bullets in them. And there were two kids, 9 and 11 with us. And I always said that if there was a camera underneath the ground, just looking at us, we would have been out that day. Because the amount of fear we were in, we were just so scared. Everybody was injured. I can still remember the smell of the blood and what everybody looked like. And the mother of the children was saying that they killed the father in front of their eyes. And one of their children, their child, 19 years old, she fainted. And she was asked to wake her up, and she didn't wake up. And they shot her in front of the mother's eyes. And that's how it started. That's how that the 51 days of mine started with guns pointed at me, screaming at us, starving us. I lost 10 kilos in Gaza. And Keith came back also like a skeleton. He lost more than 30 kilos in Gaza. I hardly ate because there wasn't much to eat, and I wanted to give it to Keith. I used to hide part of my food for Keith. Sometimes the food was rotten, and the girl with me wanted to throw it out, and I told her, don't throw it out. I'm keeping it for Keith, because I could see Keith. And I always say that the one thing that was the hardest thing for me as a human being is looking at Keith and feeling for him and seeing the girls and looking at them in the eyes when they were tortured and scared and just wanted their mom next to them to give them a hug of what they went through. I could feel myself, but I couldn't see myself. I could see Keith and the girls, and I could feel them. It was one of the worst things for me. I had to keep quiet. I wasn't allowed to hug. The only thing that I could is comfort Keith and the girls by looking in their eyes and telling them, I love you, and you're strong, and we're going to be together, and whatever they do to us, we're together. And that was my strength.
It's incredible. I've watched several of your interviews, and the relationship that you formed with this family, this broken family that got put in captivity with you and your husband, is really something tremendous and shows the human spirit in the worst of times. If you could walk us through so we can understand a little bit, where did you get put into you were put into the tunnels? It was through a house. Can you tell us a little bit how you got there, what you saw?
They used to tell us to get dressed. I used to call it a costume at that time. We got dressed looking like Arabs. I wore a hijab, and Keith wore a galabia with a hat on his head. And every time they moved us, we had to get dressed. I was moved 13 times while I was in Gaza. And one of the times we were underneath the ground. At the beginning, we were underneath the ground, and in the middle, we were underneath the ground. And beyond that, we were in different houses, buildings, houses. One of the times, it looked like a big, huge school of the UNRWA, because there was a truck outside of the UNRWA, and I could see lots of sandals, different sizes, so it looked like a school, and what it looked like inside also. And so we were moved into lots of different places. Some of them belonged to the Hamas people that were with us, and you could see the difference between the other houses, because the Hamas had a lot of money, or have a lot of money, and you could see the furniture and the way they lived and what their house looked like was different than houses that we saw that weren't belong to the Hamas. And one of the times they took us underneath the ground, and I was with Keith and another girl, and we really, really touched death. That was the time that I was sure that I'm going to die. I felt like I'm going to die. And I separated from Keith, and I separated from my family. And it was a very, very difficult moment, because there was no air for us to breathe. And Keith was just lying down, and he said that he can feel that he hasn't got no air to breathe. And I said to him, just try and breathe. And that's what we did. But at that stage, I was scared to look at Keith. I was scared to look at him dead. And then in my head, it was running all the time, what is it going to feel like if I die? Am I going to hear Keith choke, or am I going to choke before him? Or what will it feel like? It never happened to me ever before that I felt that I'm going to die. But there was no oxygen, and we were just trying to collect the little bit of air and oxygen that wasn't there for us. It was difficult. It was a time that I'll never, ever, ever forget, out of many moments that I'll never forget about being in Gaza. But that was a time that I was really scared for my life. Even though the buildings we were in, the rockets that used to go out to Israel came out of those buildings, and the ceiling and the house used to shake, and I had the feeling that it's just going to collapse on us and break us into pieces. And that's why I didn't let Keith go to the bathroom. When he used to go to the bathroom, I used to just tell him, you've got 1 second, you need to be back. And I'll never forget some explosions, or the house just shaking, and Keith isn't next to me. And I just wanted to scream, but I had to keep quiet. I used to count the cracks in the wall. And I used to pray to everything that I could, everybody that I could, just get me out of there, get Keith out of there. Just don't hurt Keith, and don't hurt us.
Can you describe the conditions where people talk about being in the tunnels, right? So your first place you were brought was, from my understanding, a house, and you went in the house, and there was an entry to the tunnel. By the way, it sticks with me an interview you did, and you said how you're deathly afraid of the dark and claustrophobic. So the idea of going down into the tunnels, in and of itself, was difficult for you. You had no choice. You had to go down. What were the conditions of being held in the tunnels? Was it a cell? Were you, tell us a little bit, if you can just describe it so people can understand what it means to be held in tunnels.
First of all, when they told me to go down, because I'm scared, I started shaking. I could hardly control my body by shaking. And then you see this Hamas terrorist looking at you from the bottom, and you have to go down the ladder while I was shaking. I shaked like I could have fallen. But I asked Keith to go first because I wanted him to look after me afterwards, like at the back of me. And when I walk down, first of all, it's slippery, it's wet, it's cold, it's dark, you can hardly see where to put your next foot, lots and lots of stairs, and you just walk and walk. And then we were walking in sand, and part of the sand was wet. And you just walk and walk and walk until you get to a little arch that's got a LED light that hardly works. I was shaking, just shaking. And I remember sitting on the yoga mat because there was no mattresses, and looking at Keith and holding his hand and trying to ask myself, what am I doing there? And scared. And then trying to think, what's going to happen to us? What are they going to do to us? While they're sitting in front of us with their guns. And they're playing with their guns all the time. You just get the feeling that you're going to die. And then my head always used to go, what's going to happen if the lead won't work anymore? And it'll be pitch dark. And then I'm going to die. I just won't be able to handle it. Even if I've got Keith next to him and I'll hug him and he'll hug me, if it's dark, I'm going to die. And then so I'm just looking at the lead and saying, okay, just relax and try and breathe. And thinking, okay, you just need to try and relax yourself because Keith needs to relax himself. He can't be with you all the time and help you to relax. And then for a second, I think about my grandson. And then I start crying. And I'm not allowed to cry. So I'm told that I'm not allowed to cry. That I have to say that everything's okay. And then my head goes again, okay, don't think about anybody of your family because you're not allowed to cry. And then my back is caught because the mattress is hard. It's a yoga mattress and it's filthy dirty. You lying in sand. You can't breathe. You don't know what to think about because you're scared to think because everything upsets you. And then I start praying for my son that he didn't suffer while they killed him, that it happened quickly. And trying to figure out just how to survive out of all this chaos that I'm going through.
51 days in of your captivity, you were released. Tell me about that day.
That day was a difficult day because they separated me from Keith, and I'll never forget that moment of me saying goodbye to Keith. I bent down and I gave him a hug and I said to him, you be strong for me and I'll be strong for you. And I said it a couple of times because I felt like he wasn't listening to me because it came out of nowhere. We didn't know that we're going out. I didn't know anything about anybody that's going out. I thought that I'm just going to stay there forever or die. And then they come and they say, you tomorrow, Israel. So I didn't believe them because they were lying to us all the time. And I said, okay, I'm not going to believe him because if they don't take me to Israel, it'll be the worst thing just believing that I'm going. So I said, don't believe it until it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And I left, and then I was trying to figure out what they're going to do to me, where they're going to take me. And I was alone with the Hamas terrorists for a while until they brought one of the Thai guys from Thailand that was underneath the ground, and he was shaking. And I just started to hug him and hug him and hug him and sit next to him and hold his hand. because that's the only thing I could do. He didn't want to talk because he was just too scared to open his mouth. And that's what we did, that 12 hours being together until that morning that they told me to get dressed. And I got dressed and I said, okay. And then more people from Kibbutz Gaza came and we were together. We were crying together at the beginning because we didn't believe it, that we met each other. We hadn't seen each other for maybe 48 days. We were together. Yeah, people that I knew from before. The family that came down to the first tunnel that I was within, that they killed the father and the daughter. That we got separated after 3 days. And they came on the last day with me out to Israel. And we were together. But I was sitting in a different van as them, and they brought this old lady that she looked dead. But I knew she wasn't dead because I gave her some water. And she had 3 sips of water. And she was freezing cold. So I asked for a blanket, and they brought a blanket, and I started massaging her and massaging her body all the time to bring, make her a little bit hotter. And that whole day of taking care of her, one of the things that I'm very scared of are bodies. And I used to shout to her all the time that she needs to keep alive for her family, for her grandchildren, for her children. And she blinked. So I knew she was alive. So I continued massaging and shouting. And then they took us, luckily in time. First of all, the first minute that I met the soldiers, that was the only first minute that I believed and understood that I'm going home. And I remember myself burst into tears. I couldn't stop crying from everything together, being scared and everything that happened that day with the old lady and saying goodbye to Keith and being scared that the old lady's going to die in my hands. And luckily, when we came back, I asked, because I didn't know who she was, what her name was. She was Enma, a lady called Enma. She's 84 or 85 already, years old. She was given 2 dates a day. She lost half of her body weight, 84 years old.
Wow.
Her body temperature was 28 degrees. And I was told that if I didn't do that, if I wouldn't have massaged her and kept her alive, she would have been dead.
Well, one common thread to anyone who's listening to this, who's paying attention, and clearly to me, is your humanity wasn't taken from you at any moment.
Yes.
Right? You kept being a caregiver.
I remember in Gaza all the time, because, we went through things that were worse and worse. First of all, I said to myself, you're going to go through worse. Every time something happened, I told myself, prepare yourself, you're going to go through worse. And it was just like that. I'm a witness of the girls that were touched. I'm a witness of one of the girls that was beaten with sticks and guns. And many, many other stories. And I think that really, really helped me to go through the time because I prepared myself for the worst. And then another thing that I did. I used to tell myself all the time, even though it's so mean and so hard, you're not going to let them take your soul away. You're not going to let them. And I didn't. I came back. I'm strong because I didn't let them. But I want to tell you that I do know of hostages that did let their soul go by seeing and feeling. And I'm sure that it's very difficult for them today.
Absolutely. Your husband, Keith, stayed in for another 430 some days.
484 days.
Right, but after you were released,
Yeah,
just doing the quick math, over 400 days on his own after that. Luckily it ended up being a beautiful story, but one incredible story while you were held hostage and then your husband for longer was your daughter got engaged, correct? But she said she wasn't going to get married until her father was back. And there's this beautiful video, which I'll ask the editors to put on in the B-roll in the background now of your daughter. And now your husband is back. And I'd love to ask you a little bit about that. But your husband is back. Let's focus on something nice for a second. I see your smile coming back, which makes me happy. Tell me about your daughter and her engagement. When's the wedding? What are the plans? And then how that fits into this roller coaster of life you've been on.
First of all, when I met my daughter, Sheer, I started screaming, Sheer, I'm going to be at your wedding. Because I came out, and the plan was for them to get married like a couple of months later.
Was she engaged before October 7th?
She was engaged, on Keith's shirt,
Yep.
the shirt with the poster
Yep.
of the picture.
Yep.
That's the moment that Sheer and Yuval, that's the day that Sheer and Yuval told us that they got engaged,
Wow.
they're getting married. And they planned to get married in April, and Keith didn't come, and they decided that they're not getting married. They're waiting for Keith. And I used to tell them, okay, don't get married, just have a baby. And she said, no. So I said, what could be better than Keith coming home and showing Keith your new little baby and saying, welcome to the family. And she said, no, we're waiting for Keith. We want Keith, her father, to be with them, getting married and having babies. And they did. And Keith came home, and they're the happiest, and we're the happiest, and we're the happiest that Keith is with us. I can't tell you how much. It's the biggest, wonderful news that I've ever heard in my life, that Keith is coming, that when Keith came back. And now we've got the wedding. The wedding is soon, on the 20th of June, and everybody's very excited about it. They're getting really ready for it. And just to think about it, that it's happening. For so many months, we didn't know when it'll happen, if it'll ever happen, if Keith will come back or when he'll come back, if he'll be alive or if he won't. And it's a moment of life. That's life. That's what life is. That's what life's supposed to be like. Planning weddings, getting married, having fun, dancing and eating together as a family.
Yeah, well, as you're talking, I keep hearing in my mind the lyrics of, I know it sounds cheesy to some, but it's okay, of Hatikva, of the national anthem of Israel, talking about yearning for the hope to be a free people in our own land. And that's what your family and all of us with your family yearns for. And I can't wait to see the images of you all dancing at your daughter's wedding. After Keith came out, you all did an interview with 60 Minutes. And there was a big uproar about a question that was asked. You were talking about hunger, or Keith was talking about hunger, and they asked, well, maybe they were hungry. Was it the case that they were hungry because there wasn't enough food going into Gaza? Which was an absurd question. First of all, factually, we know it's not true. And second of all, to ask that to someone who was a hostage for that long was offensive. I was lucky enough to tell Keith that I thought his answer was perfect. And he didn't know if it was. He didn't even know how to respond to that kind of question. Now you've had some time to reflect on it. Were you all taken aback by that? How did you react to being asked such a question on such a big platform?
That I've taught Keith that I've done, interviews many, 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 many times. And I told Keith that he has to be prepared for questions that he wouldn't like, or questions that'll be too hard for him to answer. And he just has to find a way, because we're doing what we're doing and talking to bring all the hostages home. There's 59 hostages still in Gaza. 24 of them are alive. We've got Gali and Zivi. They're twins, 27 years old. And I'm sensitive to them also because I'm a twin. And also I remember their mom pregnant with them. It's a family that I love. And I remember them as little kids running around the kibbutz, playing with my children. And 2 of her children, the mother, Tali, are in Gaza now, underneath the ground, begging to get out. So Keith and I, knowing what they're going through, are screaming and shouting for them. And that's what we're doing, because they have to get out of there. What they are going through is the worst thing that any human being should go through. And we need them all out, like you said about that you want to see us dancing at the wedding. I want to see all the families dancing. And they need it. And they need to go back to life, because real life, you only live once.
I agreed 100%. And when another important part of talking to people that have been in Gaza, whether it's some soldiers spoken to commanders and such who have one viewpoint. I'm not talking about political viewpoint. I'm talking about what they see, right? Viewpoint, literally what they see with their eyes. And then hostages. I heard in preparing for this, I've heard you talk about first one thing you spoke about how the population was celebrating with you, right? How every home you went into, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, I was just going through, every home you went into had missiles in them that were then missiles that were used to shoot into Israel. I've also heard you speak about how you still have hope for peace, and I'm sure it's just a complex feeling and just who you are. You don't want to give up who you are. No one should, as far as the hopes for peace, but the complexities of what the reality of society is there on the other side of that wall in Gaza is more difficult than most people can ever even glean or imagine. Can we just talk 1 minute about our encounter? Because I think I don't speak about this much on this podcast. We do so much about politics and we get into policy and nuance. And today's not about that at all. It's about people. And being Jewish, people don't understand. And I hope people that are not don't just turn the channel off or turn the podcast off, because it's important to understand that being Jewish isn't just a religion. We're actually an ethno-religion because it gets passed on by your mother. Mm-hmm. And when it's passed on by your mother, if you just think and zoom out a little bit, it actually literally means that we're a family. We call ourselves a nation, a people. And it's in a literal sense. It's not figuratively speaking. We're actually literally a family. Many people forgot that and have forgotten that. And October 7th woke that up for so many people around the world. Our family has prayed and done everything we can on a daily basis since October 7th and more to just try to help one way or another, and also not to get involved in the internal disputes, not just in Israel, but within the Jewish community, within the Republican community, because I'm on that side politically. It's irrelevant to me. Like, this is so much bigger than any of those issues, right? It's not just humanity. It's not just the West. It's also my people, my family. And after so many days to have you and your husband and Yair Horn, who was also a hostage, his brother Eitan is still being held hostage at our table, and three siblings of other hostages who still remain hostage, sitting at our Friday night table. Sort of the ritual of every Friday night, Jewish families get together to mark the Sabbath, the day when God created the world. In 6 days, on the seventh day, He rested. Everybody understands the Sabbath. So we have this meal, and everyone does it a little bit differently, but there's a lot that's the same no matter where you are in the world if you're Jewish. And we're sitting around this table, reciting the prayers over the wine, over the bread. There's a prayer that men give. It's really a poem to their wives. And then we sat down, and within minutes, from my perspective, we really felt that we were amongst family, and it was as complicated of a conversation as it could be. Everyone at the table was politically involved on different spectrums. No one really cared about that immediately, right? It was like, this is a family meal. And the lesson that it taught me and my children, and we stayed speaking about it for days in my house, was that what it means to be part of a family, of the people of Israel. What does that really mean? This is what it means, right? It's not just the good. It's not just the target on your back of anti-Semitism. It's actually being part of this family, and having you there was the answer of so many prayers, and we still have so many more prayers that need to be answered. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't make it less so that of an answer to our prayers. How did it feel like to you? I'm not looking for compliments for me and my family, really, just as far as our people, as part of being, you lived in the south of Israel. People don't know what it means to live in a kibbutz on the Gaza envelope. You're really disconnected almost from, intentionally, right, from so much going on. You kind of want to live this peaceful, idealistic life in a kibbutz, which is almost like a socialist type, society where you all take care of each other and you raise your kids together and you have your own economy. Mm-hmm. It's shifted over the years, but the idea of it is sort of this idealistic living and
of together and love.
And then you fly across the planet after being held hostage for 51 days, and your husband 484 days, and you show up at a house in Miami, Florida. And what did that mean for you and for your group?
Wow. First of all, I didn't know what to expect. And I said, okay, we're going. So we got dressed. Nice. looking, on Shabbat, on Friday night, you normally wear something that looks better than any other day, at least for me. And we came in and we felt the warmth. Your heart was open. And not only you, your whole family, like opened their heart with love, with caring, with sharing. And it made me feel like I belong to a big, huge, I wouldn't even call it a Jewish, but if I can say it differently, I belong to a big, huge family of people in the world that love and care about each other. And I'll tell you why in a second. But first of all, I'm finished with it, what you asked me. It was just such a warm, loving atmosphere, happy and sad together, because we were sad because we have hostages in Gaza. And I can feel it every minute that I breathe. I feel and think about the hostages there. And it just felt like we shared something. That's the most important thing of human beings to share, is our hearts and love. And I think that it's so important to feel part of the good side in life, because we don't want to kill. I was in a house in Gaza that the whole building was told to leave the building because Israel didn't want to kill anybody in the building. So we just left the building with all the people because we care. We care. But I want to share that I was in an elevator in Washington, D.C., and going down, there was a lady that was not Jewish. She had dark skin. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh my God, is that you? Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Of course." And we hugged each other and we cried. And I looked in her eyes and I could see how much she cared, because she's a human being. So I belong to that kind of people. I belong, and I want to belong to the people that care and that love. And I think that what happened on the 7th of October brought the whole Jewish community all over the world to be together. One of the times while I was in Jerusalem, a lady stopped me and she said, "You know what? I want to tell you something." After the 7th, we decided to eat challah, a bread, and to pick up du l'chaim together, to drink wine together for all the Jews that are in the building. So many people came, and they come every Friday together, and we do l'chaim and eat challah together. And I didn't even know before the 7th of October that they are Jews. It brought all the Jews to be together. And I feel it. I've been in so many places all over the world, and I feel the Jews all over are with us, but not only the Jews, the Christian people too, and even some of the Muslim people and the Arabs want a good life for everybody, for the hostages to come out, for them. You know, the Hamas terrorists, what they did to us, being Arabs, have put like a mark on any Arab in this world also. And they're not free because they looked like they are different. Nobody wants to be different. If you look at me, do I look like a Jew? Or do I look like a Christian? I don't look like an Indian because I'm not dark. And I don't look like other countries maybe. But I don't look like anything. I just look like a human being with a heart that feels and wants love. And wants good for everybody that deserves it. But the Hamas terrorists took something away from me and away from Keith. We weren't deserved to have that and be taken and to put underneath the ground and be left there alone because they didn't like the feeling of not being able to breathe. So they just left us there with no food, no water, to die. It shouldn't be like that in any place in the world. So I want to wake up the leaders. I can't get the hostages out. I can shout and scream. But the leaders of the world can, and they have to. Because they're human, we're human, we've given a heart, we feel. We can't disconnect ourselves and say, okay, let them die slowly. We're not going to do that. We're going to scream for them. So thank you.
Absolutely. And what I want to share with the world is that I think in particular in Israel today, and there's so much division on the how things are done, etc. And there's the idea of getting together. People, I think, may have different philosophies on different things, and sitting together and breaking bread and understanding that they're just people as well. They might have different ways of thinking. Some might be right, some might be wrong. It might all just be subjective, right? It might have just different philosophies. I say all the time, for families that are hostages or families of hostages or people themselves who are hostages, someone asked me, how do you I was sitting with someone that was hostage, or was a family member of a hostage, who was saying some things politically that were very, very harsh, that I obviously disagreed with, and it was very, very harsh. And I didn't say anything. And I'm very outspoken, but I didn't say anything. I gave the guy a hug and we ended the conversation. And I said, I didn't hear any words. I only heard their emotions. Sometimes you just have to feel someone's emotion and go from there and just move on. So I think there's a lot that all of us can learn from you, Aviva, from your journey. For me, what stands out again is your humanity. I saw it right when I met you, when you walked through my front door with your husband, and your husband said, "Hi, I'm Keith," and everyone in my house almost chuckled, like, "Yeah, we know," and as if you're part of our family, which you are. And we join you in your prayers and in your shouting, whatever it takes to get the hostages home, and everything else to make sure that Israel and the West can remain safe from terrorists like Hamas and other terrorists around the region and around the world. That's our job in the West, to continue fighting, but never to lose our humanity. So Aviva Siegel, thank you so much for joining me. I know this is not an easy conversation, but it's meaningful, and I know everybody that's listening appreciates it very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.